Okay, I am Robert Morgan. I'm here for the jury service, and I am doing a retrospective of my films as well on Friday at 4 o'clock. I've always found, I make stop motion films. I pretty much all of them are either stop motion animation films or they're stop motion animation with live action elements. And I've always found stop motion animation to be a very inherently uncanny art form. I've never subscribed to the idea that stop motion is kind of like a kind of cartoony form with like kind of plasticine bunnies going, you know. I've always felt that there's an inherent uncanniness to it, a creepiness to it, and a sort of nightmarishness quality to it, just because of the way that things move, that things feel like they are alive and yet somehow dead at the same time. There's a kind of automaton quality to the way things move. There's something unnatural about it. There's a kind of Frankenstein-esque quality about it as well, that you're bringing things that are dead to life. So I've always felt it's very natural that stop motion animation would be a vehicle to explore nightmarish scenarios. So it was always that way with me. As soon as I started making films, I always knew that stop motion would be a really good tool for exploring that kind of material. And I grew up, you know, as a teenager, I was really into horror movies as well. And I found myself doing art at college and wanting to make films, but not really knowing anything about films or how they work. But what I could do is make my sculptures and my paintings move. And so that was really just a natural way to get from wanting to be a filmmaker into making films through art, so just making things kind of move. So stop motion was a very sort of easy way in. And yeah, it was immediately apparent to me that I found the movement of the puppets creepy. And so step by step, the more films I've made, I've tried to push it further and further. And I have got into some very weird areas with it and some very nightmarish areas with it. But there's also, for me, there's also a sort of absurdity to it and a sort of black humor to it, black comedy to it. So for me, they're just really good fun to make. I'm always surprised when people kind of are like really alarmed by them or really sort of freaked out by them, because to me they're kind of just very funny. Yeah, I think step by step, I think I've just kind of just experimented with how far I could go with it, really. So it's just a natural sort of progression. Most of the time it's silicone rubber, but also I use wax as well. But again, it's going back to that idea of like creating a feeling of uncanniness in the puppets. So when you're watching them, you know that they're artificial puppets and they have that stop motion sort of quality to them, but they're uncomfortably physical at the same time. So again, it's this push and pull between something that you know is kind of very artificial, and at the same time, it's a bit too close to feeling real as well. So that sort of tension, I think, creates a kind of disturbing sort of quality to it. The advantage of animation is complete and utter control over every single frame. The advantage of live action is the opposite of that. It's a lack of control, and it's about collaboration, and it's about embracing a kind of lack of control, embracing the surprises that other people will bring to it, and it's kind of like just creating more of a sort of science experiment where you get a bunch of interesting people together, and that combination of people creates something that isn't quite yours, but you're sort of guiding it, you know, and sort of conducting it in a way. With animation, it's like you're responsible for every single frame of what you see solely. So I try and do a bit of both, because whenever I'm doing animation, I kind of basically go mad when I'm doing animation, because I'm just in a room on my own for a very long period of time, and I lack any kind of collaboration or any kind of contact with people. So when I've done a stop motion film, I always want to try and work on a more live action based film afterwards, maybe even using stop motion and live action in the same thing. And then it's like, oh, all these people are coming in and sort of, oh, it's ruining the film. Oh, what are you doing? Oh, why's that happening? You know, so it's like, then I go back to animation again. So it's like I never quite settle on either. I kind of like aspects of both, but that's why I try and sort of try and find a way of fusing them together sometimes as well, because I feel like then I get the best of both worlds. God. I need to think about that actually, because I don't really get disgusted by, I kind of like that stuff, you know, so it doesn't really disgust me. There's an 80s exploitation movie called Street Trash. Have you seen that? It's kind of a melt. There's this subgenre of like American horror movies that sort of became known as melt movies, because they're basically all about people melting. And Street Trash is about a bunch of homeless guys that discovered this casket of very, very strong like moonshine, booze, and when they drink it, it makes them melt. So the film's just full of these guys just melting all the way through it, but melting in sort of multicolours, you know. And that's when I saw it when I was like about 12, I think, and that I think really kind of, I think I might have been eating some fish and chips at the time when I was watching it, and that made me feel a bit sick. But that's about as close as I've ever been to being disgusted, because I don't find that stuff disgusting. And to me, it's just textures on a film, and it's sort of kind of beautiful to me. Love Actually, though, that's just hideous, disgusting.
So